Thank you very much for the invitation. I feel very honored to be part of this organization, and I'm a big fan of your graphic design that you're using, all the graphic language that you're using. Just wanted to start with that. So I'm Deniz, I'm the director of the Istanbul Design Biennial, which is taking place since 2012 in Istanbul, every 2 years. And this year is the Design Biennial. We're preparing for the 5th edition. Today I would like to explain a little bit about our event and what we are trying to do and how we are looking into design, or how we are trying to create some sort of discussion platform for our audiences, but as well for the professional design world. The Istanbul Design Biennial, and I have to explain that to make it more understandable why we're doing this biennial as we're doing it, is organized by the Istanbul Foundation for Culture and Arts, which is an independent, non-governmental private institution, not belonging to any company or family, completely independent since 1973, and is organizing 4 different festivals in the city of Istanbul, film, classic music, jazz and theater, and now has 2 biennials, organizing the fantastic art biennial called the Istanbul Biennial since 1987, and some of your colleagues worked in 2009 with us and made a fantastic addition on the Design Biennial since 2012, and we do some other smaller bits and bobs throughout the year. We do run a small performance hall that is organizing concerts for younger audiences, let's say, and we do organize the Pavilion of Turkey in Venice. So within this cultural mixture, let's say, we started to organize the Istanbul Design Biennial in 2012, and obviously with a background in different art disciplines and the art biennial, we adapted a format that was very common for the arts and presented design through biennial. But when we started to think what a design biennial should be, we were actually kind of lost and had long conversations with different experts from around the world that are organizing different design events and the biennial or design biennials, and also with some key people and experts in Istanbul and some of our audiences to understand what could be interesting about organizing a design biennial. So this first slide shows actually a very nice scenery, a common scenery from Istanbul, and that is also how the Design Biennial feels and how it actually approaches the city, I can say. And this year we're talking about empathy. I will explain about that towards the end, but for today the presentation is called the Istanbul Design Biennial as a platform for empathy. For us, the most important fact is maybe that design is something that is happening in everyday life, and that's how we are explaining or trying to present works within the biennial together with our curators and all partners and participants, how it is manifested in our life and what it actually means, or what design means if you look to design from a non-professional perspective. And discussing design and discovering design from different perspectives is, I think, the most important fact about the Design Biennial, maybe, because we present a platform for projects, ideas, and people from different fields that are working in the field of design that may not be identified directly as a design moment or a design project or designed object or field, however you want to call it. So the important thing for us is obviously to make understand what design can be. And throughout my explanations I can be a little bit provocative, but only to make understand where actually the whole or how it expands in our conversations. Our aim is to create an awareness around design within the audiences we're serving to. we are, let's say, 80% talking to non-professionals, which means randomly people that have different ideas about design. Obviously, you as professionals, you could be a graphic designer, an architect, a product designer, or a system designer, or UX designer. You have a clear idea about what you're talking and what you're doing and how you see the boundaries or the notion of design and how it works in the world or what you can do with it. But for our regular audiences that only encounter design in, let's say, in a relationship of consuming, may have a different idea. And when you walk right now through Istanbul, you see design related to different things like hair design, nail design, but at the same time furniture design or luxury designed apartments or luxury designed garments. So there's a big variety of things that can be named design or could be seen as design, but may not be if we look from a professional perspective. But I think here starts the interesting thing, again, what means design in daily life for the people that are not related to it. So we try to have a very wide view together with our audiences and try to ask questions and maybe not really give answers, but try to explore together with our audiences in which direction design is going or what it is presenting, where it is sitting right now in our world. We like to have a critical perspective to it, which means that we most of the time are in a discussion, in a hard discussion with people that do not like what we're showing or people that really are engaged with it. So most of our work is actually sitting down and discussing with different parties what we're doing, besides actually doing an exhibition as well. Contemporary issues in design are very important, and throughout the years we figured that these contemporary issues might change really fast, or what we define as contemporary is not contemporary tomorrow, but so we have to really look deep and fast into the world and see what we are talking about. If you think of design events, then you mostly think of nice objects or presentations of really nice products or technologies that are new or things that are showing how the future will be working or future designs that might shape our daily life. But in the Design Biennial we mostly talk about design ideas and crazy stuff that you would maybe not show in a regular show or would not be able to work on experiments in a commercial engagement or in your daily business. But the biennial is a platform where you can kind of go crazy and really present something that would not be fruitful in any other context maybe, which does not mean that we are far or too sophisticated, far from the real world, but there are some crazy ideas in the design world that are worth to explore. We like to see the biennial as a platform for people to engage and for participants obviously to engage and to create new relations, exchange their ideas, a moment, a window every 2 years where many partners can come together or people meet for the first time and use the biennial as a moment that triggers maybe new collaborations for the future. I like the perspective of a window because every 2 years you're talking about a new topic and you're creating an exhibition and it's just for 6 weeks actually, and this cannot be more than a window. It cannot be something that radically changes something if it's not taking place longer, but it could be a starting point or a trigger for something, and that's also maybe an important factor to understand around the biennial. So maybe we could say the biennial is actually not the real action, but what happens after and gets into action is maybe more important than what happens in the 6 weeks. every 2 years, as I said, we're picking a curator that is setting or picking a theme, a conceptual framework, and we work around this framework. In every edition, we're claiming to be very critical and discursive and putting something new in the world. When I look back in 2015, when the first Chicago Architecture Biennial started, there was a very nice concept. Oh, I have to go further, sorry. I had to rethink our idea about being discursive and elect a project that was presented by Francisco Diaz. He was invited by the curators Joseph Grima and Sarah Herder to take part in the architecture biennale and present a project that he was invited with. But he started with a daily magazine, let's say, and in the first edition he wrote a letter to Sarah and Joseph and asking a very good question. Because that year the architecture biennale was claiming or asking the question, what's the state of art, of architecture? And he was actually saying that from 2015 on, within a year of 2 years, there will be around 37 different design and architecture biennials. And every single one actually claiming to come up with a new discursive idea and bringing something new on the table, which then he counted almost every 3 weeks. In 2 years we would have a new discursive idea. So actually very much questioning the core of what we're doing with these biennials. And I think this is a very nice perspective that we as organizers or as culture managers in these events should not, a perspective that we should not forget. Obviously, with that what we're doing. So, as I explained in the beginning, it's a classical biennial that works on an exhibition that spreads hopefully through a city and then with different programs that are accomplishing the exhibition. And this is important because today I was so lucky to be guided through the Museum of Arts and Crafts, where is a wonderful section that is also talking to design history and also showing contemporary design and design from different perspectives to the audience of Zagreb and people that are coming here. Unfortunately, we don't have a design museum or something similar, so it is well necessary to have an exhibition every 2 years at least that is talking about design from different angles and perspectives. I will have different examples from different editions of our biennial to show our approach and to show what kind of conversations we're having throughout the biennial, and in the hope that you may understand how we really see or how we're trying to engage the question of design with our audiences. In our first edition, we had actually an umbrella theme. I forgot to put it here. It was called Imperfection, was given by Dejan Sučić by that time. But after giving us the theme, he was unfortunately not able to curate. So Joseph Grima and the Turkish architect Emre Ararat were invited to interpret this theme of imperfection that Dejan had put on the table, which is obviously a very interesting context if you look into Istanbul or in the region, what imperfection could mean. Joseph Grima interpreted or came up with the subtitle Autocracy, where he was really for the first time thinking differently about processes in design, how design is really designed, by who it is designed, coming up very loudly with the question of open source, how processes need to be rethought, how collaborations are becoming more important, and this is 2012, and how collective working and participation will be even more important for the future. So this exhibition gave us a completely new perspective on how to understand design. And while the displays were very unusual, the objects we saw were very unusual, so there was instantly with the first edition a moment of shock when we showed what a design exhibition could be like. Musibet, meaning calamity, was the approach from our architect Emre Arılat, who is one of the bigger change makers in architecture in the city, and he was bringing together an enormous number of young talented architects and designers that were discussing what is going on in the city when it comes to urban generation, regeneration, urban restructuring, and rebuilding the city in different aspects. And it was really an eye-opener, and calamity was really the right word to explain it, because there was a lot going on which was not really understandable for the population by that time. So this picture shows a 3D printer, which right now is not super interesting, but in 2012, for the first time ever, there was a 3D printer in public and could be seen by our audiences. So we were super proud to be able to have a 3D printer, which now is actually trash because it's so outdated and so old-fashioned that we can't even find the necessary parts that are broken. So, but we were super excited by that time. But in the first edition, very early, and Joseph Guimard was very clever with that, engaged with designers that are working, and especially with Aslı Kıyak Ingin, that were starting to work or to discover to work with craftspeople. We have an enormous resource of craftspeople still producing and living within the city, within a stone throw. So it's a big chance for designers, especially for younger designers, that are trying to do new things or to discover how to work or produce in small scales and very refined productions. So there was a very large project that was looking into a specific area of Istanbul that was called Şişhane, and Made in Şişhane was the name of the project, working with lighting designers or producers around the lighting district, from joint producers to bulk producers to metal workers and different parts, and presented for the first time in a bigger scale a project that then became a book. And this is something that we continued throughout all editions in one way or the other, and we could really see within the last 10 years how this grew and how this really started to change ways of production with young designers. Publications are very important for us. Not only because they're a graphic experiment every time, but also because we need to really write down what we're really doing in order to create an archive, in order to leave some traces, also in order to really write down the history of design in Turkey, because we don't have a comprehensive, let's say, material that is really talking about the history, about the ways how we're designing, or what is happening actually in Istanbul and this region. And I'm saying always Istanbul because our main place where we're operating is obviously Istanbul. So for us, the publications are very much a part of the production of knowledge and of the way we're working. This is a project that Joseph Guimard actually started in New York with the new museum, the new City Reader, and had a second edition in the Design Biennial, and it was a publication that was spread throughout the city, 10 editions with 10 different guest editors on 10 different projects, topics. And after the first biennial, yes, we were alone. Everybody was gone, all the designers, all the curators, but then we just started the journey all over with our next edition. In the second edition, we worked with Zoe Ryan and the associate curator Meredith Carruthers, and the topic or the next journey took us to the future, questioning the future, or questioning also where we are and what the past was. The future is not what it used to be was the title of the next edition, and it really was a platform to understand where we're standing and how we are rethinking design. This is an old Greek school that you see in the picture, which we used for the first 3 editions. It was abandoned because this Greek school was only allowed to have Greek students, but after a while the Greek community became so small in Turkey that after 2007 they couldn't operate. So we were so lucky to be given this building, or that we rented this building, and we made some little constructural support changes and transformed it into a wonderful biennial space, which now is a proper institution and works on its own and shows different exhibitions. Every biennial is an experiment in material and is an experiment to work collaboratively with teams from around the world. So one of our curators was living in Chicago, Zoe. Meredith lived in Canada. Our exhibition designers who made this wonderful installation within the big hall were living in Istanbul, super cool, and we worked with projects as graphic designers who were then in New York or all over the world, let's say. So this in itself, the biennial is a big experiment of collaborative working and stretching the work-life balance, let's say, and stretching obviously time. As I said, conversations and coming together is a big part of the biennial and a very important part, because encountering and talking to each other is what really needs to happen on a daily basis to understand, or that's how we feel, to understand what we're really seeing and to have a different look to the world, maybe through the lens of design. And again, in the 2nd edition, we were working with craftsmen. They were so generous to give their time to produce new daily objects that are in our lives. But looking back behind the scenes really also makes our audiences understand what they're actually, or what it means, what they're holding in their hand, and what the process is, and where it comes from, and what the materials are, and how the materials are changing. In the 2nd edition, we, for the first time, really started to be more engaged with the nature and with our environment and what it means in the city, and the theme of urban gardening, or the theme of how to be more agriculturally engaged in the city, was a big topic in 2014 by that time, and this was a very big experiment again by a philanthropist that engaged with different designers from Turkey and from England, and Something and Son from England actually made this vertical library of plants. So throughout the biennial, they grew different green salads and herbs, let's say, together with our audiences, and especially every day we had different children coming in. They were learning about the plants, and we were planting together with this institution we worked with, and at the end of the 6 weeks we really had salads and greens that they then moved to a place which they prepared meanwhile as cafe, which was not opened by that time, but they started their own garden, and today, after 6 years, this cafe is still running, still using their garden, and it's a very sustainable, small production and commercial cafe that works fantastically, and we're very proud because we could start this process together, and we're still talking to each other and collaborating together based on this start we had. I'm just gonna go. I remember that we had this project by Paula Alvarez, and it was just the beginning when we started to understand how we have to use social media more efficiently. And then this was an on-Facebook project where we had this designer that offered postcards, real postcards to our audiences that they could post to their families, and there is a small box on the side so you could write your postcard and then put it in the box, and we gave it really to the post. We mailed 700 postcards throughout the world, and we hear that really some people received those. Since we are not in the EU, it takes quite a while till the postcard arrives somewhere in the world, I have to say. This is a project by Daisy Ginsburg, and you may have heard her name quite often in the last years. And she had this project presented, the Sixth Extinction, which was talking about the urgency, how nature is in the need of regeneration. And she works with scientists, and especially with scientists that are talking about how bacteria can be actually, let's say, redesigned and put into nature to help nature to recover from damages that we as humans are actually causing. But Daisy, obviously, she designed new biological, let's say, organisms that are also able, and these are not real, but the idea is real and the research is real, how design, biological design can change or create maybe change and help for the future. We had this very nice project where we designed urban furniture together with communities and brought these pieces, and these are materials that we gathered from thresholds and leftovers from the city, and worked 1 week with different students and designers and community people to create these really nice installations throughout the city. Unfortunately, only these ones, they were in our exhibition space, and all other items that were spread in the city were disappeared after a week, some of them actually overnight, because the material that we got from the test were maybe so valuable that people wanted to take it and sell it, or they liked really our furniture and then took it. So we don't have many objects, but we created videos how communities themselves could actually create their own furniture for their communities with these videos that we had produced. This is another obsession of ours. It started again in the second biennial with a reading room, a collection of books of people, of participants that were important in their lives. This collection of books helped us to make different reading occasions with our audiences, but also to engage with different writers and authors that were interested in the future, or were talking to each other for the first time, coming together here in our reading room. And we extended this collection, and until now we're growing our book collection, having a library, or trying to create some sort of book collection for especially designers, young designers that do not have always access to publications that are not published in Turkey. Another topic that's haunting us is the intersection between design and food. This is a project by Marko and Defne Kos. A very futuristic idea about how we will be consuming food in the future. Maybe this is not correct, maybe this is now changing, but when they designed this, they were thinking of a more futuristic and maybe space situation, and designed the food that could be our future, but at the same time really beautiful household appliances that then we maybe would be using in the future to maybe cook our broccoli soup, which is actually only a small bowl, which then becomes a whole nourishful food. So this is a project within the biennial, the Academy program, that is changing shape every 2 years, and I would like to ask you if you have any good ideas that we could implement for the next edition. We are open to it. So we invite every single university in Turkey that has an architecture or some sort of design department to participate in one way or the other. We give them an open letter saying this is the theme of the next design biennial, so please participate, take your own stand and give us your perspective on this topic. And then they start to work within their classes and then you have some very engaged professors or students that are really then coming up with projects that they are presenting during the design biennial. Again, it can be a conversation, it can be an award ceremony, it can be an exhibition or something that really shows their idea about the topic that we're presenting that year. In 2014, again, we had the chance that we had a very big space and we brought 75 different projects together from all over Turkey, but mostly Istanbul, I have to say, in one big space. And it was a very big experiment which we could not do again as we didn't have the space. But it was a very nice encounter from different regions, different departments coming together for the first time, standing next to each other and seeing what they're doing actually in the different universities. Yeah, if you know any format that would be interesting and that does not require to do an exhibition, we would be very open to hear it. In the third edition, Mark Wigley and Beatrice Colimina were our curators, and they fundamentally changed or fundamentally opened different questions to the biennial and changed how we were presenting and how we were thinking around design. Especially gave a different direction how to understand design and what it means. The question was, are we human? And actually explaining or exploring how design actually starts with human history, not only 200 years ago with industrialization, and that design is also to be found in archaeological museums and part of our daily life in such a way that we never really encountered it enough. So we, at the parallel, and I have to say it with this slide before I continue, started also this graphic design experiment, I have to say. So you see 5 different logo designs, let's say, of our topic from 5 different graphic designers. And every single designer came up with their own typography, with their own style, let's say, and logo, and designed one part of the biennial throughout this edition. One was doing the website, the other one was doing the graphics and the exhibition, the guidebook, then somebody did the book. There was a separate book that Mark and Beatrice published with Lars Müller, the other one did that. So all of them were fantastic graphic designers, all of them did something else, and I think they didn't really talk to each other. Every single piece is wonderful. I'll leave it to you if you think that's a good idea or not, but it was really an amazing dynamic to have 5 different voices talking in 5 different ways about the topic that the curators were exploring throughout the biennial. So this is a footstep on the left side of Armstrong, giving the or maybe explaining how wide Mark and Beatrice were really thinking about design and where it really goes from the really minimal to the expanded notion till all the way to the moon, and what's actually happening and how much design we're having in space. And on the right side you see a footprint which was taken in Istanbul from an excavation site, a Neolithic port that was found and still open by that time, and a footprint that was 12,000 years old, but that's not a usual footprint, it's a footprint with a shoe. So indicating that there was, or telling the story that there was design already in the past, if you want or not. And here you see a mold of the footprints that they had found on the excavation site. And this is not just a usual excavation site. They were digging to make a metro station, and all of a sudden they found 36 ships underground, buried in close to the historical part of the city, and nobody knew about it. There were some books, some archaeologists that were thinking that there was a port, but not really knowing where it was, and all of a sudden found 36 ships underground. So these are the footprints that were preserved like meters under the floor from people living there 12,000 years ago. Well, here is a picture from space, and you see satellites that are surrounding the world, and not all of them are working. Actually, maybe half of them are already trash, and saying if we are really designing, we need to design consciously. What we're shooting out in space is not always, we can't collect it again, so we really need to be more conscious about what we're doing. As I said, there is no comprehensive book or publication that puts together all the design history that's in that region, or let's say in Turkey. So we started a project together with Studio X and a project coordinator, Pelin Darvish, called Design Chronology Turkey, a draft. We looked together back 200 years back, saying or thinking what is actually the design history, or what can we define as design history, and what are the design fields that this region was strong or is working with, or in which topics and materials are we actually working. And a group of almost 150 people worked over a year and brought out 20 topics, but only drafted 13 different chronologies about topics that are important for that region. For example, ceramics, furniture, housing, industrial buildings, lighting, music is part of design, toys are part of the design history, advertisement, communication. So you have a visualization, let's say, of the different topics, but on the tables you actually see with one chair, with every single chair is a draft of a chronology that really helps us to see how far it actually can go. We started this process, and we're still looking for support to really enlarge this research and really try to create an archive of the design history that is inherent in Turkey and in the region. Again, a lot of talking and conversation, and these are the publications that we did together with Beatrice and Mark. And the yellow book on the right side is still available at Lars Miller, and I can really recommend it because it gives a completely different view on how we think about the human and design. You may have an abonnement of Iflux Architecture, which was published for the first time together with us and two other partners during the Design Biennial, and it was a series of articles, again, producing or an editorial project actually giving also the thoughtful ideas of the different people that Mark and Beatrice worked with throughout the biennial. The fourth Istanbul Design Biennial was an experiment on with Jan Boelen and two associate curators, Vera Sacchetti and Nadine Botta. And we were thinking about design pedagogies actually, and the title at the end was A School of Schools. It was urgent because when we worked in 2017 and 2019, it was almost 100 years Bauhaus, and this is a slide that we presented. It's from our last presentation together, because we said it so many times that at the end it felt like 100,000 years of Bauhaus that we were looking into. It was a very big exercise in looking into practices that emerged after the Bauhaus, or looking also into Bauhaus, what happened there and what happened throughout history, and which experiments as school, as practices actually try to come up with new ways how to work in the field of design, in the different fields, and how the practices emerged and started to work with each other. And what it ended up to be was design as learning and learning as design, and the whole biennial and the whole process became a learning process for us all. A decentralized exhibition, meaning that we were spread in 6 different spaces with 6 different topics that were angles, how to see or how to look in different design fields and different topics, but also to show practices that are trying to be different or not consciously only to be different, but to come up with different ways of practicing design, of coming together and producing together and looking into new materials, looking into the world, what can be done differently. Astrid Tücek, our exhibition designer, was working together with Lukas Wegwert, and I think one of Lukas' work you can also see right now also at the museum in the wonderful exhibition I don't want to say the name wrong, but it's in the ground floor. And again, working together within a big group, collaboratively with people living in different areas. I think this is an iconic picture of the way how we were thinking in the 4th edition, or how Jan was actually thinking during the 4th edition. If we talk about design pedagogies, the question was, for who are we designing and for which future are we educating our design students, or what do they have to learn to be able to really see what is coming in the future, or what are the future questions actually. It's not only a practice that you have to teach, it's an attitude that you have to teach to understand, actually to ask the right questions, to understand what will be the future problem that we have to solve. But if you walk in the city, you see these ad hoc designs, if you want. So this is Nur Horsanal's archive, let's say. She made a whole publication about designs, or I don't want to call it designs because these are not designers doing these things. Products that were done by people that were in need to solve a problem. And halletmek means solving a problem actually in Turkish. And these people, they solve a problem they have with the materials they can find and with what they see around them, and producing something that is useful. In the end, maybe a designer would be thinking of such a solution for a year and come up with something that is completely useless, but a person that knows what his need is directly tries to bring something together that maybe is only a one-shot thing, and we cannot call it a design, but it is useful. I'm gonna skip this. So another thing is about, and that was also haunting us throughout the different editions, are the standards in design, and how can we define standards in design. And two professors at Bilgi University, Cansu Jürgen and Avşar Gürpınar, with their students, they did form the Ambiguous Institute of Standards, Ambiguous Standard Institute. This is actually something that happened in the 60s in Turkey. There was an Ambiguous Standard Institute that was looking into ambiguous standards and that was trying to come up with standards and register them. Unfortunately, after a while it closed, but these two professors, they found this general idea and started to think of really things that you cannot explain. Their first thing what they did was a publication explaining about standards that are not formal. Like in Turkey, if you bake bread and if you want to see what the consistency is, you say it's like an ear lap, whatever that means, or a pinch of salt. How much is a pinch of salt? There is not a standard, but somehow everybody understands what it is. So they looked into different standards that are common, and one of the most famous is obviously the tea glass in Turkey, and there is no standard for a tea glass. Here you see, and this is only one manufacturer, Paşabahçe, I think 30 or 40 glasses, but when we asked them, do you have a collection of tea glasses, they had sent us over 200 different tea glasses. And we understood that the average, and you see a scale in the middle, is about 100 cc or 100 milliliters, a standard tea glass, but there was no glass actually that was showing it. That project was really easily understood by the people and gave them such joy that we had a lot of encounter and engagement around this. They had different 10 boxes where they explained, but this was another one about eggs. And obviously industry is in need of standards, so we're standardizing, or did standardize everything in the past, and obviously also eggs. And apparently there are only 3 sizes for industrial produced eggs, let's say, but nature has more options. We're looking in the biennials into urgencies that we have in the city. And one of the biggest urgencies we have is the upcoming earthquake, or the expected big earthquake that might be destroying actually half of the city. In 1999 there was a big earthquake, and since then we're talking about the next one coming. But we're not really changing our habits and how we're living in the city. There was a mass rebuilding wave of houses that were not in a good shape, and it's still continuing, and it's 20 years now, but still, or even more. But still we haven't solved the question how we will live after this big earthquake, or what are the alternatives that we have to think of. And an architecture group, so architects that are also working at the university, we're coming together with different departments, architecture, engineers, sociologists, psychologists, and we're talking about what could be another alternative if we cannot survive on land. We're surrounded by water. Should we think of a solution that could be actually helpful to thought of? And if you have a picture of Istanbul, there's the Bosphorus, which is really a big water, but then you have the Golden Horn, which is calmer water and might not be affected as much as other shores from the tsunami that will be encountered together with the earthquake. So they built a model and a scenario for how to come up with modular systems that can be built easily on the water. And we really, besides producing a big archive and a big research on from different angles with the sociologists and the anthropologists, the architecture and the engineering side was obviously fan of building something, so they came up with a model which we really then tested. And from day one till this model was swimming, it was all over a problem. So actually what they had designed was not a perfect solution. That's what they learned at the end. But it was a very nice coming together of 2-3 different companies, of craftsmen, of the municipality, of the design biennial team, the designers, and experimenting on something that could be a solution, which until now is not clearly a solution, but it is on the way to form or to be discussed for the future. This house that is swimming on the water on the Golden Horn gave us a really big headache, because we were announcing or trying to announce constantly there is one more project coming. We opened the biennial, but this swimming house will be swimming in a week. Oh no, it couldn't. In 2 weeks. Oh no, it couldn't. In 3 weeks. Oh no, it's sinking. Oh no, this one is not swimming. So like 4 weeks later we had a model finally that was swimming. And we could present it, and our audiences could go and really see it actually. I think I'm short in time, so I'm skipping a little bit, but this is a very nice project coming from Ebru Kurbak and her collaborators, the Stitching World project, and this is the embroidered computer. It goes back to the idea, what would have happened if technology would have developed together with craftsmen. And here you see actually a functioning embroidered computer, a very simple model and a very simple version, but you have gold and copper filaments that are embroidered in this textile, and it would be working. And we had some smaller scaled models that were switching actually some nodes, let's say. And if you think of that, and if you look back into industrialization, really the first code that maybe was written was in the mills when the industrialization started, and with the first stitch you had the first code that maybe is equivalent to the computer code. We were looking in standards how we are perceiving the world and how we are shaping through the imagery that is running actually throughout our life, our ideas, and how we are perceiving different things. And I think that's becoming even more important now that we are understanding and we're more conscious about what we're consuming visually, let's say. Another project that had a very deep research in Atelier Luma, was the algae lab, thinking of new materials in the Camargue, and one of the projects was how to work with algae. And they achieved or transformed algae into a filament that then could be used in a 3D printer, and they could really print solid cups and different cutleries or tableware that is going to be hopefully produced in the future in more sizes, but an alternative to plastic, bioplastic that can be produced with algae. Talking about daily life, and this is a very small project, but one that talks to my heart. So a design professor was actually researching in the items, in the objects, in the products that migrating people between especially Germany, Austria and Turkey were carrying with them from Germany to Turkey, from Turkey to Germany, let's say. And the most traveling things were shown here. Coffee, Nescafe and Nutella, and until today coffee and chocolate are the most traveling items and valuable items between Germany and Turkey. I can say that because my family still is carrying in both sides. So here are successful examples of design items and very unsuccessful design objects, like the yogurt maker, which is a technology that came from Germany, because obviously after a while people didn't remember how to produce yogurt, but this is a common thing in Turkey and you would still do it and you wouldn't need the yogurt maker. So this invention was not very successful in our region, let's say. Some performative acts questioning design in the performative realm, which was really a surprise and a big new perspective to our audiences and also to our designers in Turkey, I have to say. So after this biennial, physical limits of the biennial were really stretched, I have to say. We had so many programming and so many new ideas and projects that we were exhausted, but nevertheless, again, publications that were writing down and putting down all the ideas and the new approaches here, obviously, in design pedagogies. Talking and programming, 148 programs done in 6 weeks, and I think we won't do that again, but it was very nice experiment, I have to say, how to exhaust the design biennial team. But we had fruitful conversations and discussions and workshops with many people, and that is something that we really enjoyed all together. And this is another project done by the students from the AA Do Bar project, and they were just occupying a cafe for 3 days and talking to every single person that was passing, or every person that they could catch from the biennial, and produced actually a publication. So people were so keen to discuss. This is the opening evening. Here is an exhibition space that team was discussing till 9. Another part was already partying at the embassy. So it was really a lively period. Here we are with our new topic, Empathy Revisited, Designing for More Than One. This is our new topic for 2020, curated by Mariana Pestana, together with Sumitra Upam and Billy Muraban. And this picture is very iconic to me, because this is how we feel in the beginning when we start to work with our curators. Everything is very green, lively and nice, but then everything goes crazy. And what are we talking about? I don't want to tell too much because it's still in the making, but with Mariana shortly is actually explaining is empathy revisited means we're going back to the origin of the word of empathy, which was in the beginning of the 20th century describing a relationship between a human being and the object, and later on a relationship between an artwork, and late in the 50s it became actually a description of empathy between people, between communities. So the question is, where does design stand here, and how can it be a tool to create empathy, because we are missing empathy, and with all the technology that we're having in our lives, what does it mean? Where does it help? Does it hinder? How can we create more empathy between communities through design, with design, is the larger question, and this is the moment where we have to ask the question. We will have two different spaces. In one called the observatory, we will be encountering and seeing an exhibition that really will try to show objects and designs or design ideas that may help to create empathy, and the other exhibition will be called The Kitchen. And in the kitchen we are going back to the very idea of sofra, which means actually the dining table or dining moment for people, or in Turkish, let's say. And the idea, very core idea of sofra is actually the moment when you come together and create empathy, where you talk to each other, maybe people coming together again that were not talking to each other, or communities can find themselves again building trust and creating empathy. So what kind of design can help or creates different relations, or is in the use when we create these relations, and we will explore this around the kitchen. Obviously eating will be involved, but it's not only about the eating, it's about different topics that can be discussed in this kitchen, which will be literally a kitchen in the exhibition space, and will be animated by different projects and people that we are inviting. And actually our open call for that kitchen was running for the last 6 weeks, and it's closing in 2 hours, or in 3 hours, I think, with the time difference. So if you still have an idea, just send it in. And obviously this is not a new idea. Kitchen was used quite often in history by artists, by different designers, or the role of the women in the kitchen, here you can see, and different ways how preparation took place, and how we can rethink it, how we can go maybe back to Asian ways to produce and to cook or come together. And these are exemplary imageries that may give you an idea what we're working with for the next edition. Yeah, and maybe you will have the chance to visit us in September, or maybe be part of the next design biennial when we try to revisit empathy. And most of the time this is how we feel after the biennial, but we do it again and again. I hope I didn't bore you, and if you have questions, please shoot.